We are live.
Good morning. Welcome to the Social Services Committee on Wednesday, March the 6th, 2024. The roll call, I think, has been taken by the clerk.
The roll has been taken.
Okay, we are missing a couple of councillors, but we do have quorum. Could I ask if there are any declarations or conflicts of interest for any items appearing on the agenda today? Seeing none, either on screen or in the room, I'll move on. At this time, I will ask members if there are any items the committee wishes to separate for discussion purposes. As there are delegations and a staff presentation, item 5.1, the City of Brantford Encampment Network (Coburn) Housing Bylaw Pilot Programme Evaluation will already be separated. Can I please get a mover and a seconder to place all items for consideration and consent on the floor? No, sorry, my apologies. Councillor Miller?
Yeah, if we could, Mr. Chair, separate item 5.3 as well. It is related to 5.1, but.
Thank you. Rose?
I'm going to do the same.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like anything else separated? Mandy?
6.1.
6.1. Thank you. Now, can I please get a mover and seconder to place all items for consideration consent on the floor? Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Oakley. Can I please call a vote on all items not separated, reading the titles that are subject to the vote?
The titles that are subject to the vote are the Trillium Way Capital Budget Amendment and the minutes from February 7th. All those in favor? That carries. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to delegations and presentations. We have two registered delegations today. One of them will not be here in person. I understand that a staff member will read out something that has been written by this particular individual. Sorry, I must need to read something ahead of that. Prior to hearing the delegations, I would like to remind those in the meeting today of the following rules of decorum as set forth in the city's procedure bylaw. No person shall display any sign, barrier, or placard in the meeting room other than materials that, in the opinion of the chair, are legitimate audio-visual aids necessary in connection with any presentation to be made to council. All persons present shall use polite and respectful language and shall refrain from the use of any language or the making of any gesture that is disrespectful or offensive. All persons addressing council shall speak only on the subject in debate and shall not speak on any other subject. No person shall applaud participants in debate or engage in conversation or behaviour that may disrupt the proceedings of the meeting. So now back to our staff who will read out something that was being presented by a delegate that is not here today.
Oh, there we go. Hi there, my name is Dawson Hayworth and I am a Community Initiatives Coordinator with the City of Brantford. I'm reading a statement off of one of my clients, Jessica. Hello, my name is Jessica and I'm a 39-year-old. I was born here and lived in Brantford for 37 years so far. For the majority of my life, I have worked and been able to survive and support my own cost of living expenses, whether in a relationship or on my own. Over many years, I have had no problem finding rooms or an apartment for rent that were not only affordable, but in abundance. Until recently, I've never been homeless for more than a couple of weeks at a time. It wasn't until my mid-30s that the price of living expenses in affordable places became harder and even impossible to find to rent. Rent skyrocketed to nearly double of the price of rent, what rent used to be. Along with the cost of living, like food prices went up, especially on healthier food options in grocery stores. And fast food prices became less affordable, especially on the value items menu. So back 3 years ago, my boyfriend and I lost our apartment. We were renting for 2.5 years. It was too difficult to keep up with the rent, and utilities alone were $1,100 a month. Unable to find another affordable place before being evicted, we ended up homeless, losing everything, We had nowhere to go, no shelter. We had nowhere to go in shelter, being full for couples. We laid our heads either out on the street or in a friend's couch. We filled out housing forms and waiting lists, which we were informed it was a few years wait. We were in contact with the Housing Resource Center. They helped us very minimally, but by putting us in motels for 3 nights and for a month after being outside, homeless for 3 years and feeling it was very helpless and frustrated. We were approached in our tent that was apparently on city property by 2 people that worked for bylaw and outreach. Within a few days, they were able to put us up in a motel room and continue to help us with our housing applications. They are positive and geared to actually solving homelessness problems in Brantford. They saved our lives and also have helped us accomplish other tasks such as getting our ID back, birth certificates, and taking care of our court dates and other important things that we had trouble remembering. We continue to have a roof over our head at a motel while doing the assessments and getting into co-op housing in city-funded programs. If it weren't for this program, the 2 positive, experienced people running it, I honestly saw no positive outlook for our future. I hope this program continues to succeed and help others that are in a similar situation that we are.
Dawson, thank you. Would anybody like to ask questions of Dawson? Seeing none, thank you very much for the item you brought forward. Moving forward, on the same subject, I'll now ask Ron Cromwell to please come forward to speak to item 5.1, the City of Brantford Encampment Network Coburn Housing Bylaw Project Program Evaluation. Ron, you have 10 minutes to present, including any questions we may ask.
Hi, my name is Ron Cromwell. I'm 52 years old. I've been homeless for 4 years. This group has helped me out tremendously. I have some illness. I have a brain injury. I got cancer. Quite a few things wrong with me. I was living in a tent down by the river for the last 3 years. And then my son had got some trailers. We put him on some property where we were asked to leave after 2 years. So yeah, this group here has helped me go to doctor's appointments, taking me there to remember. I have a bad memory. But yeah, if it wasn't for these guys, I don't know where I'd be. You know, I was looking at death, and these guys saved me. So I give these guys, a lot of thanks. I wish there was more people like them.
Thank you, Ron. Appreciate those comments. Would anybody on the committee like to ask questions? Ron? Seeing none. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ron. Ron, I just want to ask about your encampment because I don't know much about encampments. You said you're living in a tent by the river. Were you living on your own or were you living with another group of people?
No, I was living on my own at first, and then I started like a community with other homeless people that I invited them down to stay where I was. All safer with us staying as a group. Okay. But yeah, and I ended up having 10 other people with 10 staying with me. Then yeah, one day the city had come and they had bulldozed our tents down. Didn't give us no time to get our stuff. or anything. They just chuck it and threw it in the dump truck and drove away with it.
Okay, another question, Ron. Why did you stay there? Why didn't you seek shelter in one of the shelter spaces available?
Honestly, because of my illnesses and stuff, I have a lot of like defaults, like talking to myself and stuff, and people judge me and stuff, and I just don't like to be judged, and I feel very uncomfortable that way. So we start getting into problems.
Okay, so just to be clear, there were spaces available?
No,
far
a
as
lot
you know?
of times when I went, they put me in a motel like for 3 days. Then when they found out how sick I was, I got a motel. They would give me a motel for a little longer. Then I would have to leave. I go back to it, on the streets, living wherever, in the parks, under a tree. Then they'd find me again a month later or something, put me in there for another 3 days. And that's how it went. But yeah, no, I went and checked out the shelters and stuff, and because of what's wrong with me, they didn't think it was a good idea.
Okay, and last question, you mentioned after a while, a few others had come to the encampment. Do you know, what became of them? Were they helped as well? Or do you just lost track of them? Do you know anything about what became of the others?
I know a few of them did get some help, but the other ones, they just I didn't see them after a while. They just disappeared.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carpenter?
Yeah, Ron, thanks for coming. It's very brave of you for coming. I'm on the screen, Ron. Congratulations for coming forward. That's very brave, and you are important to us, and we do care about you. Where are you living now?
I'm staying at Bell City Motel, thanks to by a lot of people here.
You're likely in my ward if you're staying in a hotel, and if you are, feel free to reach out. Are you getting any funding?
I'm
Any
on
money?
disability.
So your ODSP is you're getting that okay?
Yeah, I pay some of the rent, like my shelter parts, but yeah, I am getting some, but like with my illnesses and stuff, the disability hasn't, done anything about it. I've asked them and stuff, and it's like they just don't answer me, and then I let it go because I just forget about stuff, right?
Yeah, I get it. I get it very much. Thanks for coming. You're very brave. Really appreciate you coming forward and giving your experience. It's good for us to hear it from someone that's actually experiencing it instead of anecdotal. Thank you very much, Ron.
I appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions? Ron, once again, thank you for coming. We do appreciate you giving us your time and your story. It's important. We're going to discuss the subject a little later, so I hope you'll stay with us and listen to the ongoing conversation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have a presentation from Mary Musson, Director of Housing and Homelessness. Again, re the City of Brantford Encampment Network Housing Bylaw Pilot Programme Evaluation. Mary, I'll ask Mary to come forward and provide a presentation regarding this item. Mary, you have 10 minutes to present, and that questions will be held until the item is on the floor during the debate part of this meeting.
Good morning. Through the chair, my name is Mary Musson. I'm the Director of Housing and Homelessness Services.
And my name is Dave Wiedrick. I'm the Director of Bylaw and Security for the City of Brantford.
So while homelessness has always been a prevalent issue in our community, it has been typically much more hidden. Prior to the pandemic, the most common examples of homelessness were couch surfing, people who were sleeping in cars, or people who were living in buildings without heat or running water. However, since the pandemic, there has been an increase in the visible encampments in our community, and this can be attributed to multiple factors, but most notably the rising rental costs, increases in addiction and mental health demands, as well as barriers to accessing services. City staff from multiple departments, along with Brantford Police, did develop a structured encampment protocol in 2020. In January of 2021, the Housing Resource Center services, including this homelessness outreach portion of the encampment network, was awarded to a contracted third party. So as a result, the outreach portion of the original encampment process was the responsibility of the contracted third party to complete. As part of the quality assurance reviews, a major systemic barrier was identified, which was the elapsed time between identification of an encampment site, having outreach staff provide an appropriate response, and then subsequent bylaw and parks staff responding and cleaning up the site. This disjointed effort made it very difficult for staff to locate identified encampments, engage meaningfully with residents, and it really failed to provide adequate supports to encampment residents. So what we did is that because of the identified gaps in service delivery, the Housing Bylaw Pilot Project was launched in July 4th, 2023. A dedicated housing bylaw team has community initiative coordinators who provide the housing outreach services paired with bylaw staff who jointly respond to encampment complaints. This pilot program aims to demonstrate the efficiencies and, more importantly, a much more effective way of providing services that meet the needs of individuals and households who are experiencing homelessness and who are living rough. The first step that we did was reviewed our encampment standard operating procedures, and we updated them based on legal decisions. The second step was engaging with community partners.
And one of these community partners was the County of Brant Bylaw Department, Director Greg Bergeron. We've all worked together on this because if it's happening in Brantford, it's going to happen elsewhere. We know that. So the standard operating procedure that Mary spoke about actually made up our training and four very important legal cases. So I'll go through just the four of them very quickly, just so everyone knows why. The first was a United Nations Rapporteur report on the homelessness in Canada. The United Nations brought up 8 principles. These principles are part of our SOP, and really it ensures that we engage with the people, we ensure they get their basic needs, and we treat them with dignity. The next was an ombudsman report after Toronto cleared many parks. I'm sure we've all heard about it. There was a lot of great information in the 23 recommendations that the ombudsman made, and our staff used these almost on a daily basis. Some of the suggestions, such simple things as if you're going to ask a person to leave, buying them a coffee and a muffin to make the transition easier. It's just, and so that it's just part of our daily routine. The big court case that really came to affect all municipalities was out of Kitchener-Waterloo in January 2023. There, the judge stated that no evictions shall take place unless there are shelter beds available. And then the judge went on to explain that every person's situation had to be looked at. If they were a family, we couldn't separate them and put them in different shelters. If they had pets, we couldn't separate the pets from them. And we also had people that were banned from shelters. And how were we going to make sure that they were looked after? Then in the latest court case out of Kingston, that was just November of 2023, the city of Kingston actually tried for an injunction to get an encampment moved. And the judge came down with a report saying what they did, they could not do because beds weren't available. Within this report, if someone reads it, paragraph 102, the judge actually stated, if there were sufficient beds to house the homeless population in Kingston, the bylaw would no longer be unconstitutional. And one thing I want to point out is from both the Kingston and the Kitchener court case, no judge had said that we can't stop communicating with these people. So even though staff go out and if their bed's not available, we can still communicate and try to help them to find other shelter means.
So our City of Brantford process for the encampment network has been updated. One of the major factors is that if there are no appropriate shelter beds available, we will not be asking people to move from where they are at. We do have 2 separate responses, one for encampments that are on private property and one that is for encampments on public property. For private property, the response is fairly straightforward. The bylaw staff, they attempt to contact the property owner. And if the owner provides a permission, city staff will attempt to assist the individuals who are on the property. If the people who are encamping on private property choose not to accept services, the property owner will be provided information on how to liaise with Brantford Police Services to enforce the Trespass to Property Act. For encampments that are on public property, the bylaw outreach team attends the site and attempts to engage with the individuals who are there. The very first thing we try to find out is whether or not the people are identifying as Indigenous. This is very important because we have partnered with Brantford Native Housing, and for anyone who is Indigenous, Brantford Native Housing is the lead agency who directs the coordination of supports. We offer access to shelter if there is appropriate shelter space. And if the service is refused, the encampment residents are advised that they cannot continue to reside where they're residing, and they're provided ample opportunity to pack up their belongings and to move. Throughout this whole process, staff continue to provide information and education about available services so that they can find the supports necessary.
And when we started this pilot back in July, there was lots of education for everybody. So it started out with the city and the county and Brant Native Housing. And then, as you can see, many other agencies joined in. Community Strategies and Family Support, Grand River Community Health, St. Leonard's, and new coming to the table is ODSP and Brant Paramedics as well. And these Friday morning meetings are incredible, the sharing of information and making sure that we don't duplicate the services for people or have the same customers over different agencies.
So what we have accomplished since July 4th of 2023, we have visited 165 encampments. 93% of these encampments had individuals who had not previously engaged with outreach in the past. So we have been able to provide education to more people. Of the 108 individuals we did engage with, 21 were previously unknown to the system. So that's 21 people who previously did not know how to access services. Out of these 108 people, 80 of them, so almost 75%, accepted services and were willing to participate with our program.
And one of the highlights for me of these 165 encampments, Brantford Police were only called twice. And we only had 2 people that we had to visit a second time.
So looking forward, what we would like to do in the next 12 months is increase the collaboration for continuous improvement of our pilot project. This is interdepartmentally, so working better within the city departments, also with our community partners, including the County of Brant, our healthcare system. We also want to look at streamlining services. It is hard for people who are moving from encampments into emergency shelter to navigate a system. So we want to make it easier to move not just into emergency shelter, but to more appropriate permanent housing and ongoing continuous system improvements.
And for the counselors from the county, you will be happy to know that because of our relationship with the Director of Bylaw, we're ready when things start happening in Burford or Paris or Oakland. So we'll be there for you.
Thank you, Mary and Dave. The committee will now consider the items that were separated for discussion purposes. Could I get a mover and a seconder to place all separated items on the floor? Councillor Martin, Councillor Sikoli. Is there any discussion on item 5.1, which is the City of Brantford Encampment Network Housing Bylaw Pilot Programme Evaluation, which we just heard 2 delegations on and the presentation from. So I'll start with Councillor Samwell.
Thank you. I just have a quick comment here. I just wanted to say that first, I'm pleased to see this report today. This program is really priceless, the difference that it's making for our community. And I couldn't be more proud of our staff for coming up with this innovative program that allows real-time access to supports. I believe it's the first in Canada. So I'm really happy to hear that and all of the great results that we've heard from it so far. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll go alternately between the screen and the room. So I'm going to go to Councillor Compton next.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Member, so to staff, is there $1 million, $1,085,628? Is that what's been allocated to us from the federal government for this program this year?
Through the chair, Yes, so this program is funded by Reaching Home, which is a federal grant funding. And for 2023, we had 1.1 million allocated to us. And then starting in April 1st of this year for 24-25, we have 1.085 million. That is correct.
Yeah, and could we get it, because the expenses of hiring the two people, I see the numbers there, but could we get how much, like a breakdown of how that money is spent and was spent last year, so we get an idea what our costs are?
Through the chair, yes, that's going to be coming forward in an upcoming report in April for the Reaching Home investment plan.
Okay, so the federal government's gonna fund this for, is it till 2028? Is that what I see?
Through the chair, yes, right now we've had funding commitments up to 2028, but as you will note, in starting in April 1st of 2026, our funding is projected to decrease to 344,000.
Oh, increase from the 1.85.
It's decreasing from 1.085 million down to 344,000.
In 2020, say that again, 2028?
As of April 1st, 2026, our funding is decreasing.
Oh, it's decreasing next year. Okay, well, that's not good. I noticed that the support worker pilot program, so the support worker pilot program is working very well. I noticed that in the numbers, 54% are substance abuse, over half are substance abuse. But what do we have for substance abuse treatment center here in the community?
So through the chair, for substance abuse treatment, St. Leonard's Community Services does provide some inpatient and outpatient programming, including detox beds, and they do have residential programs. However, the addictions and mental health is significantly lacking, and we do need more support in that area.
So what we need actually to go along with this, if I'm reading you right, is a full treatment center with wraparound services and places for people to live, as opposed to a treatment center where you're finished treatment and you're back on the street looking for a place to live. Is that the process that we have now?
Yes, Counselor. I mean, that would definitely benefits. Obviously, we've been assigned accountability for this area homelessness, but not responsibility for all the services that are provided. So we don't have that now, as you question, and the province is responsible for that area.
Yeah, the province doesn't seem to be on board for this at all. I understand that, and yeah, I'm not too sure where they are on this. I guess they're asking for 1% decrease in the interest rate. But question about the private property services. Now, you said if a private property owner gives you permission, then you can have the Brantford Police called or the OPP. What if the private property owner is okay with the encampment? Then what happens?
Through the chair, then that's where we actually go after the property owner under the zoning bylaw. You can't have someone living on your property. The current zoning bylaw is 14 days, but the new bylaw will be even less. I think it's 3 days. So
Well,
if the owner allows it, then it comes back to bylaw to enforce.
so is the bylaw something that can stand up in court against human rights?
Well, we wouldn't be evicting the person by law. We'd be charging the person for breaching the zoning bylaw. And then it would be them that has to move the people along from the property to not be violating the offense.
So the next step is providing enough space. So when you looked at the regulations that said keeping families together, has our shelter space taken that into account and provided shelter space that accommodates those things?
So through the chair, right now with the third parties that have been contracted to provide emergency sheltering services, we do have a significant deficit in some shelter spaces, specifically for couples. And we do not have a family shelter, and none of our shelters are pet friendly right now. So any families who have compositions that cannot be accommodated will be placed in motels, because that is an extension of the sheltering system right now.
Yeah, now the motel extension is.
Councillor Carpenter, can I just cut you off
Yeah,
at that point?
Put me back on the list.
You can come back again.
Can I just add to that, Mr. Chair, though? I think it's important points.
Please do.
To the answer. If I know council and this committee is used to talking about, well, we've added 20% more beds. We've gone from 70 beds to 83 now, and adding more beds and adding more beds. Most communities now are looking at reducing beds. And it's redirecting people. People, once they enter the, read the literature, once you enter the shelter system and you've been in it longer than, 3 or 4 weeks, it becomes an abyss, a black hole. And most people are redirecting to family in kinship care and to other things before people enter the shelter system. So it's going to be something that I know Mary and I are having great discussions with other areas and how they're doing it. And we will be something coming forward the council probably the next 6 or 7 months to have that discussion, because it's a new way of thinking about shelter system, not just adding more and more, but redirecting and actually making people successful, stay out of the system.
Thank you, Brian. Look to my left, I think it was Councillor Coley first, and then Councillor Martin. You're coming.
It'll be your turn soon. Calm down. This is a great program. I know that I've reached out a few times, and I've had some constituents reach out to me to ask, what we can do. So for the sake of anybody watching today, when a community member spots an encampment while out on the trails, can you share with us where we should direct them? I believe there's an email address or something. If you wouldn't mind sharing that.
Absolutely. For anyone who notices people who are living rough or they're concerned about them, just calling the city's customer contact center on the main line or just emailing is the easiest way. What happens internally is that the customer contact center staff logs it into a tracking software program that we have that immediately alerts the outreach team, and then we do make plans to visit that site within 24 hours.
Perfect. So outside of just reaching out to your ward counselors who can definitely point you in the right direction, you can also reach out to the city of Brantford and we can visit that site. I think these numbers are pretty terrific in that we've been able to double the amount of individuals that we're helping. If you look at the numbers pre-pilot program versus now, we've been able to more than double that. And form that relationship. And I know that when you're, like you said, in that black hole, it's really hard to see the light and really hard to figure out where to go to get that help. So this is really an olive branch that we're extending to those in need in our community. I see that 54% do struggle with substance abuse. So I think that's excellent data for us to have. And it's something that we otherwise wouldn't have had if we weren't invested into this pilot project. So it definitely will help point us in the right direction when we're providing those services. And I'm certain that under your leadership that it's going to continue to expand and grow as we identify the needs. What concerns me is the funding coming from the feds. So it's going to drop dramatically. We're going from 1.2 million to 1.1 million to 1 million to all of a sudden cut by a third, and we're at 344,000. So I don't want to see us lose that momentum. So I'm wondering if perhaps it would be wise for this resolution, but also item 5.3 that we amend it to send a copy of this to our MP Larry Brock, just so that he's aware of what's coming and that perhaps he can be ready to support us in hopefully keeping that funding coming from the feds. So I will put that on the table if you think that's appropriate now, or you want me to wait until everybody's spoken.
Let's wait till everybody's spoken.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Martin, Councillor Sless, and then to the Mayor on the basis that the Admiral speaks last. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to staff, do you have a plan for 2026 when your funding's cut by 2/3?
So through the chair, what we are hoping that one of the recommendations in this report is to bring forward these two positions, the community initiative coordinators, to be included in the 2025 shared services budget as a strategic budget investment for social services committee to consider adding to the municipal tax base.
Okay, and if that's successful, would that allow you to continue this without any further cuts?
Through the chair, yes, it would.
Okay, and we used to have mental health supports in this community through Rosewood House, but wasn't properly funded by the province. Has there been any attempt to encourage the province to fund that properly the way it should have been in the first place?
Through the chair, I know different community groups are always advocating and lobbying for funding from the province. St. Leonard's Community Services is also always striving to find funding. But right now, from what I've been told, the province is not downloading enough funding for addictions or mental health supports in the community.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sless.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to either Brian or Mary, the cost of 5.1 and 5.3, what's the total cost?
So
And maybe while you're, oh, okay, if you got it, okay.
yeah, I'm just doing some quick mental math here, counselors. So for this program, for what is currently funded by grant funding is 208,000 is funded annually for the cost of 2 community initiative coordinators. And for
We're working as a tag team here, so at 5.3 counselors, that's 200, Mary just right, it's 423,000. So between the two of them, there's about 650 or 660,000. Again, back to Councillor Carpenter's question, we'll bring back a full report on the investment around this fund, but that's quick math on 5.1 and 5.3.
Okay, well, thanks, Brian. Is that funding envelope used in other areas than what we're discussing today? Because it would appear we're leaving about $500,000 on the table, which I presume they just claw back.
through the chair, no, we are using every last penny of the Reaching Home grant funding. There are other areas that is being funded, which includes
Okay.
any residual motel costs, our winter encampment response, our winter sheltering response, as well as all the other operational needs that goes with funding homelessness programs. So we are not leaving any money on the table. We're actually, we could use more funding.
Okay, thanks, Mary. I appreciate that. No, the pilot you want to extend to March 31st of 25. Is there a reason we don't go to 26 when the funding is still almost full before it starts getting the drastic reduction?
Through the chair, yes. What I'm hoping to do is that with the shared social services budget, once the positions, if they're approved for the municipal tax base, then the program would become permanent.
Okay. My next question is how often do we have no space to put somebody? Somebody comes and we have to say, we have nowhere for you. Does that happen? And what happens when that happens?
Through the chair, Katerina Knezovich, Manager of Housing Stability. There are times that shelter spaces are full. With the encampment pilot project, typically the folks that we're supporting are couples or couples with pets. And so those are folks that we would assess for motel placements. As Mary mentioned, we currently do not have a family shelter. So more often than not, spaces are available within the motel hotel shelter system.
So that, if I understand your answer correctly, we never have a situation where someone is told, I'm sorry, we have nothing for you.
I can think of one case in particular where the motels were full due to a hockey tournament. And so there was a time that we did ask for those encampment residents to stay put, and that staff would continually support them in place until there was additional spaces for them.
Okay. And then I would presume these folks would all qualify for some form of social assistance as far as financial to buy food and necessities. And probably most don't apply or don't know how to apply or don't know where to apply. Do we assist in that and make sure that they're set up with some type of sustainable way of providing food for themselves?
Through the chair, excellent question. Yes, so our 2 CICs assist with clients on obtaining financial income as well as wraparound supports. So if we believe perhaps they might be entitled to other benefits through OW or ODSP, the staff here also assist in navigating those processes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Sess. To Mayor Davies.
So through you to staff, first of all, a question to staff. So between us and the County of Brandon, the Mayor's Housing Task Force plan, we've, over the last 4 years, have constructed a number of buildings that I would describe as being supportive, having supportive assisted living units, in particular rent geared income. And that would start with Marlene Ave, Forest Denson, 177 Colburn, the Lucy Marco residence coming on this summer, of course, Trillium Way in the county, and we're working on a 70-unit building on Sheltered Lane. So every year we're building. I'd like to know, how does that compare to what other municipalities are doing? And two, the fact that we're building these units, how important is that in being able to respond effectively, compassionately, and in a useful and a productive way to those that are homeless and living on the streets?
To you, Mr. Chair, we are, when we compare ourselves to municipalities and the builds and actually foundations poured and actually what's been built, we're leading the pack on building affordable housing, rent geared income, and those that have rent supplements to them. So we're doing very well. And you can see that we had a report, was the last month or the month before, my timing may be off, but our impact on our wait list is dramatically decreased from those builds, as well as a lot of the work that on this end, it's all connected, it's all system, it's all throughput. On this end, it's all from Mary's work and Dave's work, helping people redirect and find them housing and quickly, and find them proper shelter quickly, helps them back into the housing sector.
And through the chair, and just to add to that as well, this is so necessary for the compassionate response. As you heard earlier, diversion is very important in our shelter system. And what the overall goal is to limit shelter stays to 2 weeks or less. That's per best practices. The success stories are when we can move someone who has been experiencing homelessness, whether it's a short time or a long time, into either temporary or more permanent accommodations. I can share some success stories. I know there are people right now who the encampment team has helped. They have put them into appropriate temporary spaces, and they are waiting now just to be screened to see if they can go into 177 Colburn Street West or to 5 Marlene Avenue. So moving people from homelessness into appropriate permanent housing, it's very important that we continue to build.
And so in essence, what the court cases say is that you can't ask people to vacate a property unless you have some kind of accommodation for them in your entire shelter housing system. And so my question then is, if we weren't building what we've been building over the last 4 to 5 years, and if the city doesn't do that, does that then mean in essence you're going to face and you have to live with permanent encampments? Is it that direct a relationship?
Through the chair, yes, that's the simplest and easiest way to explain it.
And do we have any permanent encampments in our city?
No, through the chair, no, we don't.
So how many people would, who are not taking advantage of what we have to offer, how many people do you think at any one time are refusing what it is we can provide to them?
Through the chair, just for the pilot, about 26% declined services. So I would say approximately a quarter of them refuse services.
So what do they do? Where do they go?
Through the chair, that's the great work of the CICs. Like I said, they communicate with the people, tell them, you know, what you're doing. We had a complaint, and they try to help them. Is there a friend you can go to? Is there family you can go to? The brainstorming, and that's even these Friday morning meetings. We do that. They bring up a case. We had a lady living in a car, and you know, everybody tried to help. She couldn't get heat in her car, and it was as simple as, well, she didn't have enough antifreeze in her rad. But it just, again, there's so many different ideas, and we try to help people. So it's not being the meanie and pushing them out all the time. It's working with them.
I'll hold you off at that point, Mayor Davies. If you want to come around a second time, I will invite you.
Absolutely.
Councillor Miller.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of questions. Great report, full of information. And I know it's a great report because when I'm reading it, I have questions and then they get answered as I read further in the report. Just to be clear though, we have 2 CICs now, and staff feel that 2 CICs will be appropriate for the future, correct?
Through the chair, yes, right now for the short to medium, long-term, 2 CICs should be enough. Our team is 4, so it's 2 CICs, 2 bylaw officers. It's really keeping a pulse on what's happening out there, and we may have to increase at some point in the future, but right now 2 is quite enough.
Okay, second question. A previous report on this subject kind of alluded to some provincial funding, homelessness prevention program. But it doesn't sound like any of that's being used for this program. Sounds like it's just the federal funding. When staff come forward, because you mentioned you'll have a report in April, can you just talk about if that's possible to access that money as well? Because I'm sure I'm sure it's all spoken for, but I'm just wondering if that wouldn't be something we could look at as for funding, and I'll leave it at that. Next question, the numbers, July 4th to December 31st, you said 165 encampments were visited, 108 individuals were engaged. It sounds like we have more encampments than individuals. Do some individuals start an encampment, and then maybe it does get closed down? Do they go start another encampment? How do we get way more encampments than we get individuals?
Through the chair, that is correct. Some get called in and they're already vacated. And so that's the ones that we get cleaned up. But there are many cases where, yes, they'll be in one spot and then they'll just move to another spot. Someone will give them another tent, a newer tent, and they'll just set up someplace else. So that's why sometimes we don't find people at the encampments.
Okay, and then an encampment would be defined as one tent or one, say somebody staying in a car? Would those be considered examples of encampments?
Through the chair, yes, one tent staying in a park, yes, that would be an encampment. In a car, no, that's just a person living rough.
Okay.
Again, we really didn't put a number to it. We have many incidents where we get calls in the morning about someone has slept in a park overnight. Our staff go out and no one's there. It's gone. So there are still people living rough, but they're not setting up an encampment. They're just staying over, almost like a motel stay, but in a park.
Okay, and then last question, Mr. Chair. I think everybody in this room would agree encampments aren't an ideal situation. Can you just talk maybe from bylaws perspective, how safe or not safe are these encampments? Because I read, there was a fire at the one, and I've read other cities, fires are a real problem because it's flammable material. And then their own personal safety. How dangerous are the encampments, I guess, to the individuals living there?
Through the chair, the danger part would be fire. Agree 100%. Actually, we this year we have not found too many propane tanks, so we're getting to these people fast enough, getting them shelter that they don't need to do that unsafe heating of their tent with a propane and an open flame. In regards to the people, most of the people that our staff deal with need help. They need help with decisions. They need help to get their identification. They don't know who their worker was, things like that. And so it's getting them back into line and getting them and pretty much being their babysitter. It's a terrible thing to say, but they are.
No, and I appreciate that comment because, yeah, some people need more help than others. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, staff.
Thank you. Councillor Oakley.
Oh, there we go. Through the chair to staff. So you mentioned 24% don't engage with services or with our services. Does this percentage encapsulate folks who find an alternative solution, i.e. staying with family or friends, or just those who presumably move to live elsewhere outdoors? And if that percentage does encapsulate folks who find alternative solutions that don't require services, are we keeping track of or otherwise delineating the difference between the folks who end up at a friend's place versus those who continue to be on the street? And for those who end up in a situation where they are couch surfing, so on and so forth, are we still maintaining contact with those folks or not?
Okay, so through the chair, I'm hoping I can answer your question. So for folks who refuse services, oftentimes it means that we're not going to see them again. So we don't know where they have gone to, but we also don't know for a fact if they were actually homeless. Our staff have encountered people who aren't homeless. They're not residing rough, but they do enjoy spending time with their friends or acquaintances who are at encampments. So for the people who refuse services, there's a variety of reasons why we might not see them again. It could be that they go live with friends. It could be that they actually have housing intact and they were just spending their leisure time at the encampment. But what it comes down to is we don't see them.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can I ask if anybody else would like a first time speaking opportunity? Seeing none, then I'll go, oh, sorry, Mayor Bailey, go ahead, please.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. It's a great report. It's a really great news story, and I think it's full of information that we don't know. I think it's good that you're going to be bringing your report forward to explain where the money goes, as Richard Carpenter has asked for or asked about, and you said it's coming, so that's great. And it's good for us to know because there is a certain amount of people that maybe it's the ones that refused our help that we see wandering around, and people say, they're all still wandering around, and how can you say that you're helping everyone? But you gave us a lot of information today. You gave us a lot of speaking notes when we're speaking to people and telling them that these people aren't forgotten or we haven't gotten to them yet. We've gotten to them and they've refused it, or they've got their other things on their mind, or they're living different lives. So I thank you for the report. I can't wait to see the other report coming through as to where the money's going. And I think you've given us lots of good positive responses when we're speaking publicly. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Bailey. Assuming no more first time speakers, I'm going to go back to Councillor Carpenter and then to Mayor Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So we've got the wraparound services for everyone at the hotels. When we put them in the hotels, that's a temporary solution. We're not seeing that as our permanent solution. Are we looking for some further recommendations or places to place people other than these hotels that are in the middle of residential neighborhoods?
Through the chair, yes. Thank you for the question. The motels are a very temporary stay. Ideally, we are moving individuals and families out of the motels into more appropriate accommodations, whether it's transitional housing. We do try and connect with all of our community partners that would have appropriate supportive housing if we can bring people into our supportive housing program. So anyone who is placed in a motel by the encampment team continues to receive the intense case management supports from the community initiative coordinators until they are moved to more appropriate housing that suits their needs.
And I do think the team's doing a fantastic job, and this is a wonderful program. So my comments are not criticisms, but hopefully room for improvement. Now, when we talk about the hotels, are we also tracking because we have to have, the police are there quite often. Are we tracking how much expense the police are dealing with these hotels? And a second to that, we've seen a lot of fires in what you call garden sheds and garages, detached garages. Have we tracked that information through our fire department to see if that was someone living in that garage or someone that had gotten into there or into a vacant building and decided they needed heat? Do we track any of that information at all?
Through the chair, looking at my CICs right now, almost every day they go and do follow-up with the people at the motels that they put there. And we're made aware if the police were called, but it's not that often, maybe twice a month. And it's usually about a disturbance, and it could be someone that's come to not be welcome there at the motel. And that's what happened.
Or we're seeing mobile homes start to attach to hotels.
Regarding the fires, I know I did see a report that there a number of fires that were down by the river, but none that were linked to our encampment. So just people that I guess were hanging out and started a bonfire, but not really linked to what we have been dealing with, not in the last 9 months.
And when Ron was up, Ron was talking about how the one encampment that he was in, we came by and we just sort of took a bulldozer approach and took everything and took it away to the dump. We do recognize that even though these things look of no value to us, that's their whole life. We do have that understanding.
Through the chair, yes. And Ron, that was before we started this pilot, that he lived by the river and then he moved into the trailer. That was the old way of doing things. Many cities were doing it, and we've learned that that's not the way to do it.
Now, when we talked about this funding program, this program is funded by the federal government. Is the provincial government giving us any money? If the answer is no, why would we not attach this program, the success of this program, to the province and to whatever funding agency we would look to? And the funding agency that's providing us the funding from the federal government, why would we not attach this report to them as well as our MPP, of course, or our MP and MPP?
So through the chair, for our homelessness programs overall, we put together as much of the funding that we get from the provincial and federal governments as possible. So the HPP, the Homelessness Prevention Program funding, it's actually used to fund 3 programs within the housing and homelessness services. So with HPP funding, there's just over $7 million allocated from the province to fund homelessness programs. So that includes all of our contracts with third parties for emergency sheltering, for the emergency shelter intake line, and for other homelessness programs that cannot be funded by Reaching Home federal grant funding because of the program guidelines. With the HPP funding, there's also funding that's allocated to our Strong Communities Rent Supplement program to keep people who are housed with rent supplements to make sure that their housing stays affordable. And also our Live Well Brantford Brant youth and adult programs, that is also funded by HPP provincial grant funding. So between the Reaching Home federal funding of just over $1 million and the provincial HPP funding of just over $7 million, that's what we use to run all of our homelessness and supportive housing programs.
And a final
Councillor
point.
Carpenter, can I stop you there? I'm afraid under the rules of the city, your 4-minute, second 4-minute term is over.
Okay.
No, Davis.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Now, I asked a bunch of questions, but last time I spoke. What I want to talk about is what we're doing and how that compares to other cities. So many other cities, they're not building housing to the same extent that we are, the supportive housing. They try and bump out their shelter system so they can comply with the demands imposed on them by various court decisions. And then they have encampments that become entrenched. I'm not going to say permanent, but they tend to grow over time. And then what happens is the residents, usually in the neighborhood where the encampment is, they put so much pressure on the local police service and politicians that they come in, and maybe the instigating factor is a fire or someone is seriously hurt. And then they bring in, and yeah, they literally bulldoze them out. And, you know, those are the really terrible news stories that we sometimes see. And that's because, not criticizing these other cities, but they're not doing what we're doing, which is we're building housing. We're building rent geared income housing. We're building supportive housing. Fortunately, we have the motel system that gives us some flexibility in our shelter system. We are earnestly trying to arrive at a solution that does meet the needs of those who are most in need. And Mr. Chair, I went out with the encampment team one Friday. This was in September, early September. I have to tell you, what an impressive group of people. They've got great leadership. You know, they start the morning off with all the groups that are involved, whether it's St. Leonard's, the Grand River Community Health Center, housing staff, Brand Native Housing. So they'll have a list of all of the current encampments, and they actually will know what the needs are of the people that are there. And then they dispatch staff out to that location, and the staff that are in a position, either staff or employees of other outside agencies that are able to meet the needs of the people that are at that encampment. And so there's a real genuine effort made to, first of all, address whatever the needs are of the person or persons that are there. And then if they refuse that help, then of course the bylaw enforcement team comes in. I went with one of them to one encampment where they were doing that. I call it a compassionate, it's time to move on if you're not taking what we're offering to you. And it's not a bulldozer approach. And I have to tell you that I was really very, very impressed with our staff, how they've organized this, how outside agencies are now joining in because they see it's really quite effective, such as, you know, St. Leonard's and the Grand River Community Health Center. I think we're doing a kind of really remarkable job here locally in how we're dealing with encampments and dealing with them, as I said, in a compassionate, responsive way. And as I think the litmus test is, unlike many other communities, we rarely call upon police services to deal with the situation here in Brantford, when that's not the case in a lot of other cities. So hats off to the staff leadership, Mary and Dave and the team that they work with. They've got a really dedicated group of employees, staff and outside agencies that I think are doing a tremendous job. And I thank them because not only are we dealing with encampments in a way that many residents expect, but we've heard today from the people that have been helped that we are helping and we are improving their lives. And that's really what it's all about, right? How can we best help those who need help and do it in a way that's compassionate and effective and really does help them and just doesn't move them along. So great program.
Councillor Sash, you'd like to speak again?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. One question I didn't get in on my last speaking chance was, how do we ensure these folks get a hot meal when we bring them in, and then when they're in the shelter, I presume they don't stay there all day. So do they get let loose with a breakfast in the morning, or how is that handled and how is it funded?
Through the chair, in regards to folks that are placed in our motel system, once they're placed, our CICs connect with the food bank to get them a startup kit so that they have food to sustain them. And then if they do not have income, that's when the CICs come in and assist with getting their file granted through OW, or if their file's on hold, to navigate that system. Through the shelter system, they operate 24 hours a day and offer 3 square meals.
Okay. So that's covered in the budget then of the shelter operation. Is that the idea?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Any further second time speakers? Okay, then we will move on to Councillor Sokoli. You have a, oh, Bailey, go ahead. You're muted.
No, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'd just like to say too, that we're very lucky to have all those motels. You know, we've been complaining about the motels for years and years. I don't know about the city, but in the county, they get to different points of disrepair, and we listen to the neighbors complaining, and we do all kinds of things. And we're very lucky to have them here now, because they have become a very important piece to permanency. And we're very lucky, and I think we should do the most we can to some of the neighbors that have to put up with sort of unusual circumstances a lot of the time. So just letting you know that not all cities or not all counties have the availability of all of these motels in different states of disrepair that we have been able to use. So in that way, we're very fortunate, I think.
Thank you. Let me go to Councillor Sokoli. You have an amendment?
Yes, I'll bring forward my amendment now, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Samwell. We'll add item E to this resolution, that the city clerk be directed to forward a copy of this resolution and report to MP Larry Brock.
Do we need to vote on that? Okay, all right, thank you for that. Any discussion on that amendment? Councillor Carpenter.
Yes, as I said earlier, sending it to Larry Brock, who's an opposition member, is good for him to argue and to talk about how wonderful the program is. But we should also be sending it to the ministry that provides the funding at the federal level, and to our MPP Will Boma, to say the province needs to get on board with this successful program. So I'd like to, unless if it's not friendly, I would move an amendment that we do that, or I can do it separately as a separate amendment if you like.
Let me check to see if that's considered friendly.
I have questions before I can say if it's friendly, to be honest. So I guess it's not.
I guess it's not, so we will deal with that. Do you have a seconder for your amended amendment?
I don't know. You'll have to look around.
Yeah, Councillor Oakley has just done that. So let's put it on the floor for comments. I think
Thank you,
Councillor
Councillor.
Sokoli wanted to comment.
I just had a question. Does the province provide us any funding on this currently?
So through the chair, with our funding allocations, we did not allocate any provincial funding to this program because all of the provincial funding is helping other areas of homelessness, including, like one of the counselors mentioned, all the contracts to the emergency shelter. So that includes all their operating funding. So the way the budget was done for homelessness this year, this is purely reaching home funding. However, that being said, any increases to provincial funding will help offset costs for homelessness prevention.
Okay, thank you.
Would anybody else like to speak to the amendment to the amendment? Seeing none, I'll call the vote on it. Oh, sorry, Mayor Bailey, please.
Yeah, I have something to say too. We in the county have a second MP, which is a Liberal MP, Brian May. And he does have a lot to do with a lot we do in the county. And I would suggest that we copy him too, as he sits in the right position at the table. And I see him often, and I think he could be very helpful.
That's friendly to my amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Miller.
Well, technically, we have 3 MPs in the county, just to be clear.
Okay, then as long as we get the right number of MPs on the letter, that's good. Let me call the vote on this amendment to the amendment.
All those in favor? That carries.
Thank you. No, so we'll go back to the amendment as now amended. Does anybody else wish to speak to that before we call the vote? Seeing none, call the vote.
All those in favor? That carries.
So we have to go to the main. So now we go back to the main motion. Anybody like to have any final comments on that? Seeing none, we'll call the vote.
All those in favor of item 5.1 as amended? Carried, thank you.
So as we conclude that part, I'd like to thank staff. Since I've been chair of this committee, we seem to have had a really good dialogue on a number of issues. First time this one has come forward, but also thanks to people that came to speak, to Ron and to the lady that didn't come but did give her story, very telling to us and very supportive of the work that is going on. So thank you very much for coming. I'll move on to the next item now that was separated, which was item 5.3. It's separated by Councillor Miller.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple questions. This also is supported by the federal funding I see. Just one very specific question. Each SHW, Housing Support Worker, provides support for up to 30 program participants. It says there's 92 clients in the program, but you're looking for 4 HSWs. Why would you not go with 3? Why do you need 4? That's the first question.
Through the chair, that's a great question. So this pilot program started up in April, and so we have not reached full capacity yet with onboarding tenants who need assistance with housing stability. So that is one of the reasons why we have not yet increased to full complement. Secondly, operationally, right now in housing operations, which is the division that oversees tenancies in all municipally owned or operated buildings, there are 4 property managers. So operationally, we have paired a housing stability worker with a property manager, and they get referrals directly from one portfolio. So this helps ensure consistency for the tenants who are in the buildings. They know which property manager and which housing stability worker they need to work with.
Okay, it's a bit of a dive into the weeds for me, but I wanted to ask that. So thank you for the answer. And then the second question, this is not dissimilar from item 5.1. Also a pilot program, funded from the same program. So when the funding ends, in the report, it says we're going to not have these 4 positions. That's it. It's a value call, I guess. Is a CIC more valuable than an HSW? And I ask that in the context of, I always was under the impression that prevention is a lot better than, dealing with the after effects. So an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? That's the saying. How does, I'm guessing staff doesn't quite see it that way. So if we can prevent the homelessness, that's how I see this program. then we'll have less encampments down the road, less homelessness. I wonder how staff would respond to those thoughts I was having, but when I read this report.
So it's a great question, Counselor. It's, we have two reports. One, we say that we'll, put the staff in the 2025 shared service budget. And that one, the other one would say if we can't get the money, we'll end the program. It's really, there's not enough money. And how do you prioritize? What do you see as more value added? And that's where it's a tough decision. And we can have the same resolution that we try to put in the budget, but then our property taxes go up and up and up, and we're now paying for stuff the federal and provincial government can do. And so when looking at this retrospectively after yesterday and seeing the juxtaposition between the two, really in talking to Mary and her team, it's the value add we saw more as in the first program, we talked about the encampments versus the second. But if this committee so wanted to add us to the shared services budget in 2025, they can put that same resolution in to the resolution.
Just, yeah, okay, I don't know that you had those discussions at the staff level because we're just reading both reports, just those jump out at me, right? That, like you say, that word juxtaposition, which I can't spell or pronounce, but I appreciate that. And I don't know if something that, I don't know if you need a motion or something, but I don't know if that's something maybe staff could revisit, right? Because like I say, I was always under the impression that prevention is better than the cure. You spend money on oil changes for a car so you don't have a big engine repair later. So I hate to see this program go because it sounds like it's a very successful program. It's just, I would like to see some way to save it. And I don't know how to go about that without, and I appreciate what the CAO said. Money is always an issue, but.
Councillor Miller, your 4 minutes is up, but you may want to come back afterwards if you want to make a subsequent amendment to this resolution. I'd like to move now to Councillor Carpenter.
Thank you. I'll speak to Councillor Miller's ounce of prevention. Well, the federal and provincial government have been out of housing for 30 years when they download it. It's been 30 years, people. So this problem has been growing for 30 years, and the housing crisis has been growing for 30 years because the federal and provincial governments abandoned it and gave it to us as municipalities and put it on the taxpayers' back, the property taxpayers' back. So we're not gonna get out of it very quickly. In building 4,000 square foot houses, as the Ford government wants to do, isn't going to do anything for the poor. I really appreciate Brian Hutchings for you saying geared income instead of affordable housing. I wish we would start using that term more often. Thank you for saying that because that's what's really needed. Affordable housing doesn't do much for anybody. But I want to ask about what are we doing about the Habitat for Humanity? I had a recent constituent call me. Habitat for Humanity 5 years ago made him and his family front page news about how they're building Habitat for Humanity, and this is one of the families that's going to have a home. They haven't broken ground yet on Brentwood and Dunstan. We don't know where they are or what's happening, but they got the property for next to nothing. And this individual is now, him and his wife and his 4 children are paying $2,650 a month rent, plus they're eating hydro. They're working their butts off just to keep their kids fed. And now I'm just wondering, on the housing portfolio, where is Habitat for Humanity and what is our communication with them?
Councillor Carpenter, Habitat for Humanity is a partner in the system, and I remember that very well. It was in 2019, and you'll remember the fall of 2019 they came forward with that proposal to build in your ward. They have had a lot of changes in their management and their senior leadership in Brantford, and amalgamation with another area, and they've just like just reached out to us in the last few weeks to talk about their plans. But their plans have totally have been off the table because of their leadership change and their amalgamation. So we're in very early stage discussions with the city about anything we can do in the affordable housing area or help Habitat for Humanity out or whatever we do. We haven't even discussed that yet.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. I appreciate that, Brian. Very unfortunate because in 2019 to now, the price of the cost to build housing is more than doubled, and the cost of amount of houses that are going to be available from that not bring it forward is affecting our community, affecting housing and the availability of housing. So we're doing what we can. Is there anything we can do to help them move forward? Do we need to make sure they have a board of directors that's representative, or they've got a full board? I mean,
That's
guess,
exactly what that's exactly what we're doing, Councillor Carbon. The first discussion that staff had with them is to see how the city can help, and is there some sort of partnership, and it looks positive, but it's just the first discussions. We're going back to the table to have
Yeah.
more with them to see how that would work out.
Well, I'm Roman Catholic, so the Catholic Church basically gave that property to Habitat for what it cost them to buy it 20 years ago, which is pretty much next to nothing. And if I had got the property and I was in charge of Habitat Humanity, I would have went to a developer and said, I need 35 units. How many units do you need? You build all of them and I'll take 10 or 15 of them. There's about 50, 60 units going there, but none of that happened. So yeah, it's unfortunate that we lost those spots. So are we also working with co-ops to find more housing and options? I know we were.
Councillor Carpenter, I think you're drifting a little bit off the subject here.
Subject is housing, helping people with housing, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but it's about housing support worker pilot program. So I will just cut you off there if I may.
Okay, so
Councillor Samwell, thank you.
well, I don't appreciate that.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to say the Housing Support Worker Program is another fantastic pilot program, and really it's good news all around in the reports this morning, regardless of the concerns brought forward by my council colleagues regarding funding. I was pleased to see that 92 clients have been supported since the inception of this program, and I look forward to seeing how many more citizens can be helped with it extended. Thank you.
Thank you. Go to Councillor Sikoli.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You're doing a fine job this morning. I do have a quick question for staff. How would these individuals who are in need be connected with a housing support worker? It seems like a lot of them are tenants who are, just reading some of the success stories, sort of on the verge of eviction. And this really is, there's a huge prevention piece to this, which I love. If you could just enlighten me to how either a tenant or a landlord who has a tenant who's on the verge of eviction who might benefit from this program might connect this resource to a tenant, or a tenant who's in need might find this support out in the community.
Through the chair, in regards to city-owned and operated sites, the property manager can refer to the housing support program. In regards to tenants themselves, they can also self-refer to the program. Typically, they'll connect with the property manager or the property manager assistant, indicating that they need some supports, and then that would assist us in making that referral.
Okay. I particularly love this program because I'm noticing in the success stories, a lot of it is just their home has gotten out of control and they've missed appointments. And I'm a firm believer, and I feel this personally, your environment is a reflection of your mental headspace, and your mental headspace will usually be reflected in the environment that you're living in, which is why I always make my bed in the morning. This is a PSA. Always have a tidy bedroom. But that's why I really do love this, because I think it puts people in a really great mental headspace to be able to tackle the next step. And that's something that's really overlooked typically. So keep up the good work. We've helped a lot of people so far. Full support on moving this forward and continuing with this program. And I'm going to bring forward the same amendment that I brought the first time, and I think we'll just use the wording as amended from the first time when I bring that forward. Do you want me to do that now, Mr. Chair, or wait till everyone spoke?
I'll wait till everybody's spoken. I think maybe Councillor Miller also has an amendment on his mind as well. Does anybody else like to speak? Seeing none, then I'll go first to Councillor Miller and then to Councillor Sikoli.
Mr. Chair, I don't have an amendment at this time. Things are evolving, but I would ask that staff at least we hear something on this program before it ends, if that's amenable to staff, because like I said earlier, it does seem like a good program. It does seem to be working well. And we don't know what will become of the federal government and whether if we put a little bit of pressure on them, we can increase the funding. So no amendment per se, but like I say, would like to see a report before this one wraps up.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think staff were nodding heads there, so I think that's not a problem. So I'll go back to Councillor Sikoli.
And I'm going to lean heavily on staff right now to assist me with the wording exactly as it was, as amended the first time. So I'd like to bring forward an amendment that states that the city clerk be directed to forward a copy of the resolution and report to MP Larry Brock, and the MP Brian May, and our MPP Will Balma. I believe I
I think there might have been one more.
captured that,
MP.
and that'll be seconded by Councillor Samwell.
Thank you. I'm sure the staff will get the right wording on who to send out to. Does anybody have any comment on that amendment? Seeing none, then we'll call the vote.
All those in favor? Thank you, that carries.
And then we need to go to the main motion. Any further comments? Seeing none, call the vote.
All those in favor of item 5.3 as amended? Thank you, that carries.
Thank you once again to staff. Moving on to item 6.1, which was separated by Councillor Samwell.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to separate this morning just to ensure that it didn't get lost or not pulled, for maybe the folks listening at home to know a little bit more about this. It's another valuable program that's having a huge impact on our community, and I just wanted to highlight the youth portion because I don't think that we hear enough about that in the Live Well Brantford Grant Program. So part of the great news that I read in the report there was that 8 youth have been housed for 1 to 6 months, 4 youth have been housed for 7 to 12 months, and 13 youth have been housed for over 12 months, which is, I think, just really speaks to the success of this program. And I just wanted to make sure that that was also highlighted this morning. Thank you.
Thank you. Would anybody else like to speak to item 6.1? Seeing none, then we can call the vote.
All those in favor of item 6.1? Carried, thank you.
Thank you. Moving along, there are no resolutions. There are no notices of motion. So therefore, I will bring the meeting of the Social Services Committee to an adjournment. And thank you to staff, and thank you for those people that came to oversee and view the proceedings. Thank you.